Wonderful. Well, it's my pleasure to host today's webinar. Of course, this is the 29 years as Civil Celebrant with Jeremy Hodson. We're also going to ask him about being a chaplain, which is very interesting because I have very few points of reference for what a chaplain is or does. So that's going to be an interesting part of our discussion later on. Right. Can everybody see the screen? If we just get a thumbs up from everybody. Wonderful. Okay, so this is the agenda for today. We're going to have our introduction. As always, we're going to do our little initial commencement ritual. Those of you who've been with us before, you know what we're going to do, and I'll introduce it to everybody else in a second. Then Jean's going to talk to us about the 50th anniversary of Celebrancy, which was commemorated last month. And then we're going to get into the body of our webinar, an interview with Jeremy. Also, we're going to talk to Jeremy about chaplaincy and also a mentorship program for new celebrants, for our students who are newly registered and performing their first ceremonies. We're going to talk a bit about that towards the end. And of course, there's a question and answer section. Will be reserved at the end. But in the meantime, through the webinar, we welcome your questions, but we would ask that you type them into the chat, and Jean or myself will address those questions and direct them at either Jean or Jeremy as we go through. Also, after we do the commencement ritual, we're going to mute everybody, just so that there's not a competition between different people's screens. And also, you probably don't want to have your conversation recorded in the webinar for everybody to hear. That might be embarrassing. So, okay. So I'm going to turn the time now to Jean to talk about this very, very important recent anniversary that's commemorated last month, and of course this year is the 50th anniversary of Civil Celebrancy in Australia. Can you take us through that, Jean? Or you're on mute, Jean? You're still on mute, Jean.
Okay, I should know better than that. Unmute myself. Well, that was take one. Here goes take two. Thank you, Adam.
And we can't see you now, Jean.
Okay, now we've got it. I'm working with a new computer too, not an excuse. Just checking to see if you're watching, Adam. So, take three. Thank you, Adam, and welcome, Jeremy. And yes, this year marks the 50th anniversary of Civil Celebrancy in Australia. Some of you that have done Jeremy's class, that have done my class, you would have heard us talk about the history of celebrancy. For those of you that don't know, this marks 50 years. Now, before I go on to talk about the anniversary of the 50 years of celebrancy, we've got one student who's just become registered, Caroline Franklin. You've just gotten your registration through, your application. Congratulations. That's pretty exciting. And all of those of us that are registered know how exciting that moment is when the AG sends that email through to say, congratulations, you're now a registered celebrant. And for Caroline and anyone else that was registered this year, what an amazing year to get your registration through. The 50th year of celebrancy is a pretty special I guess a pretty special time to get your registration through. So let's talk about that. Lionel Murphy, back in July of 1973, it was actually 19th of July, 1973, he was the person that instigated civil ceremonies in Australia. He is described as a humanist and a rationalist. He was certainly someone of the times who perhaps was maybe considered to be more radical than others. But he was the person that instigated civil ceremonies within Australia. He typed, he signed, he posted the letter to Lois Darcy, who was the first celebrant appointed in this country to officiate at a civil ceremony. He was so passionate about allowing couples to be married in this country in the way in which they wanted to be married. Those that were being married at the time only had the choice of a church for a religious ceremony or the registry office. If they had been married before, you couldn't get married in a church back in 1973 and before that. So registry office was the only style that you had. Lionel saw a huge gap in offering people their choice of ceremony, their choice of music, the park, top of a cliff, the beach, an outside chapel, wherever people wanted to be married. He believed that they had the right to make those choices and not be dictated to, perhaps by the church, with all due respect to the churches. Now, Lois Darcy was a 26-year-old teacher on the Gold Coast, a mother of two, and she was the one given the privilege and honour to deliver that first ceremony. And it's interesting to note that statistics from anyone that knows me knows I love the statistics. 1902, only 10% of ceremonies back in 1902 were delivered or officiated outside of the church. And that 10% outside of the church were in registry offices in Australia. Now, 2021, Bureau of Statistics are a little bit behind. I know we're 2023, but the latest statistics finalised for 2021 show that 80.7% of all marriages in this country are civil ceremonies, 19.3 are religious ceremonies. So there's been a huge change over the 50 years. What else is some good information that I can give you? New Zealand followed Australia in 1977. So 4 years after Australia instigated the first civil ceremony, New Zealand followed suit. UK followed in 1980, so quite some years after, but UK are only doing it for funerals and non-legal ceremonies. And United States didn't adopt the system until 2002, so it's relatively new in the States, and they've actually followed the Australian model of civil ceremonies in the community. So I'm pretty proud. I'm very proud to be a celebrant. I'm very proud to be someone in this country where civil celebrancy has been pioneered by a gentleman way back in 1973, and it has evolved to what it is now. And we'll be hearing Jeremy talk about 29 years of that evolution of celebrancy very shortly. So back over to you, Adam. Thanks,
Jean. And that's all very interesting. I think Australia, just to reiterate, that was at first in the world.
Was the
first civil celebrant, not only in Australia, but around the world, from the little Gold Coast. So,
and we would encourage anyone to do some research on Lionel Murphy. What do you think, Adam? He's a very interesting gentleman.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So you'll get some more in-depth information about civil celebrancy from way back then as well. So Google, it's very interesting.
Right. So today we're joined by Jeremy Hodson. Jeremy is based in Sydney. He's been a marriage celebrant for the last 29 years, and so of the last 30, he's been a celebrant spanning 3 decades, and has immense amount of experience and wisdom to share with the students. I was privileged to go down to Sydney last month to participate in the mock ceremonies that some of his students were doing to finish up their course. And it was very interesting to see Jeremy, his approach, as he was taking our students through their mock ceremonies. What else can I say about Jeremy? Jeremy's also a celebrancy. We're going to ask him a bit about that later on. But so Jeremy, welcome to the webinar. We've got some questions that we want to put to you. So when and why did you decide to become a married celebrant?
Well, thanks, Adam and Jean. Thanks for having me on. A little bit nervous about it. So many celebrants and students, and but thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, when I think about Civil Celebrancy, you know, celebrating 50 years, and I've been in it, you know, give or take a few months, 30 years, makes me feel old, but I got into it in the religious space. So that was my starting space. I grew up in Adelaide, so if anybody's from Adelaide, and my father was a preacher, a minister in that church space, in that religious space. And so I grew up watching my dad marry people, bury people, doing, you know, baby dedications and all those other life stage ceremonies that we get involved in. And yeah, I was captivated by it. And my parents have since passed away. I did their funerals a couple of years ago, but that's really was my inspiration. I love my dad and just watching him in that space. And to be honest, I like the microphone. To me, as a young guy, it was like the power of the microphone. Give me that microphone, you know, and the authority that came with it. You know, you're changing. We talk about this in the course. You and I, those that are celebrants, we have that. Yeah, I don't look at it as a position of power, but it is in a sense where we're involved in that transaction or that change of somebody's status, you know, and that's amazing to be in that space there. You know, I now pronounce you to be, so for me back in the day, you know, it was a bit of that power and the microphone and the stage. I wanted the stage, you know, and so it's still a little bit like that, to be honest. My strong point isn't the paperwork and the documents. It's all legal at the end, you know. But give me the microphone and let's get the party started. But yeah, and then I very quickly moved out of the civil space. So I'm marrying people in the church space. You're not getting paid for it, and then a lot of the people that were asking me to marry them were friends of people that were in the church, and they weren't in the church, but they kind of, I remember once somebody said, oh, wow, your priest is cool, you know, not that I was a priest, but it kind of, wow, we didn't really think that priests in that church space could be fun and a bit more chilled and relaxed. And so I very quickly moved out of that space where there was some money, to be honest, to be made, and moved into the civil space. And as you know, you can't hold two licenses. So I had to give up the religious license and take on the civil license, which enables you to do religious anyway. So I didn't lose anything. So I had the best of both worlds. But certainly now, I'm glad I made that change. And then listening to those statistics, Jean, that 80% now of marriages are outside of the church. And I think I now marry a lot of couples that are in that church space, or one of them is, or their parents would prefer them to get married in a church, but they don't want to. So even those in the church space are still choosing the civil space.
Yes.
And I think it's because of the freedom for the bride to ride down the beach on the horse, or which is never going to happen in the Catholic Church. You know, you're not going to see a horse coming down the aisle in a Catholic church, you know, which that's what the bride wants. So that civil space makes that possible. Yeah, but that was my start. I'm grateful for my father for that inspiration. And yeah, but that's how it started, Adam.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that. And also the power of the mic. I've got a wife who's a singer and a performer and loves the mic. You know, I'm actually in her workspace today, as you can see. And, you know, she has to have that outlet. So, I do understand a lot of our students have to have that outlet. It's a great outlet. I mean, as you said, it's changing people's lives. It's being involved in the best day of their life. It has, you know, a lot of perks to it and very fulfilling for people, for celebrants. So when you made that switch to the Civil Celebrancy, what was the process? Did you have to do a course back then?
No, I think I was already fit and proper, hopefully. So yeah, it was a simple swap. Because in the religious space, I didn't do a course either. And I think that, it was just, I did it. Well, I don't know if it was online. I probably went into the office maybe and swapped it over. So there was no course, there was no fee. That they just, you know, I gave one license over the counter and picked up the next one, and the next day I'm away in the civil space. So there wasn't much to it. Yeah.
But I mean, as a trainer, I observed you teaching your students, taking them through the ceremony, the parts of the ceremony, and showing them, okay, this part of the ceremony is a great opportunity to be able to include, you know, the guests. Or this is in this part of the ceremony, here's 3 or 4 things that you can say or do. And all those things put together make an amazing ceremony. And obviously you don't sort of arrive at that place overnight. It's experience that you pick up. And hopefully, of course, you're imparting a lot of that knowledge to your students as well.
Sorry, is there a question there? I got distracted.
Well, the next question I have for you is you were saying you switched over to Civil Celebrancy. How did you go about finding clients back then, and how do you find them now?
Yeah, well, for me, back in the day, you know, brides weren't looking on social media. There was no Insta, there was no TikTok and Reels and this and that. That's where they look now, isn't it?
Yes.
So it was word of mouth, and it was friends that, you know, engaged couples at their friend's wedding, and they were lining up next, and so and it still happens a bit that way now. So it was word of mouth, and I guess when you've been doing it as long as I have, you would hope that you get word of mouth. If you're not getting word of mouth, then maybe there's a problem. So still for me, it's word of mouth. And I like that because they've seen you in action. So there's no sell. You're not having to sell yourself back in the day. They've seen you, they've heard you, they've watched you, and that's who we want. So how do we pay the deposit? So it removes that process of the meet and greet and the pitch, and which I still do that, but it's a lot easier, isn't it, when you don't have to pitch, which can be a challenging part of this role, you know, having to pitch for business. But so it was always word of mouth.
Well, I think I might throw in here that, you know, I noticed you telling your students about how you go about picking your clients. You kind of discriminate against certain people. Now, on your website, you can see a whole range of ethnicities and people. But I remember you saying, if I'm going to spend 10 hours on my weekend with these people, I want to make sure I'm going to have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
for me, because I package it up as an MC. So as we know, we can have multiple complementary businesses. So for me, there's a pre-marriage thing that I can do, which I don't do much of that now, but it's a little bit time consuming. But certainly I love being the celebrant and the MC, and that package is quite nice. And a lot of couples like that, because a lot of couples, they don't know the MC. The MC is provided by the venue. So the fact that they've got to know me a bit, and then I'm going to be their celebrant to then, you know, be the MC as well. So for me, I'm looking at it, that I'm going to give that couple the best part of 10 hours. So I want to know that I'm going to have a good time. I want to know that I'm going to enjoy myself. And that's how I select. If I know my lane, and you know, maybe some of you are starting out and you're not sure, my advice would be to take everything. But after a while, you realize what you're best at and the couples that bring the best out of you as well. And so for me, I have no hesitation in saying that the stronger the connection I make with a couple, the better the ceremony is going to be. Now, we can all say, I'm going to give you the best ceremony ever, right? And we endeavor to do that. But the reality is that the stronger the connection, the better the ceremony is going to be, because we've made a strong connection, and that connection brings out the best in me, and also the family and the guests. You know, often I had a couple ring me a few weeks ago. They said, "Oh, we're looking for a funny celebrant. You know, we want heaps of laughs in the ceremony. Are you a funny guy?" You know, well, you know, I can tell you I'm a funny guy, but at the end of the day, what do other people say? I said, go onto my website, you'll see me. And they said, oh yeah, we saw that. And right from the start, you had people laughing. Okay, well, maybe I'm a funny guy. But I said to them, the thing is, let me ask you, are you a fun couple? And do you have fun friends? Because if you're not a fun couple, and probably if you're not a fun couple, your friends aren't going to be fun either. And this isn't a comedy show for me. That's a different platform. So you want some fun, you want some laughs. I understand that everyone likes a little bit of humor, but I'm not a joke teller. And, you know, and in the end, it sort of made them think, you know, yeah, okay, maybe it's not going to be that fun because we don't have fun friends. So, you know, you got to know your lane though. So for me, I know what couples I like. I know what I'm going to enjoy. So for me, it's chill. It's not too formal. It's laid back. It's the beach, the park. That's where I am at my best. And with couples that are a bit chilled as well, you know, that brings out the best in me. And I think that would be true for most celebrants, unless you don't care, or not care, I shouldn't say that. Unless you don't mind, you're in it for the money, and whether they're a boring couple or whether the ceremony is going to be exciting and there's going to be heaps of wow moments, which is what we want, those wow moments. If people aren't fussed about that, then I'll take you $1,000 and be thankful for that. And perhaps I haven't enjoyed myself, but that's not for me. Yeah.
That's a great answer. And yeah, I mean, I'd pick you, mate. I'd pick you if I was doing a vow renewal.
Yeah, okay.
Interesting.
Okay, so look, do you ever have to? I suppose that answer sort of like preempts the next question I was going to ask you, was, do you ever have to act as a counselor to couples that are about to get married?
Yeah, that's an interesting space, isn't it? I think, hey, we all have baggage, you know. We all, you know, couples that are getting married, they've got some baggage. They've got some family stuff that's happening. You know, I know when I got married, my mother-in-law disappeared for 4 days in the week of the marriage, you know. So every family's got stuff happening. And when you bring people together at a wedding ceremony, there's different dynamics happening, you know. You'll have the bride who there's an AVO being taken out on her mum, and her mum's not going to be there, or then the mum turns up, or they're, you know, couples estranged from their parents or family members, and they're going to be there, and that can create tension. And, you know, so you've got those different situations happening. And as the celebrant, we're there in the middle of it. You know, I'm not going to be confronted by an estranged parent and then run off to the groom and say, your mum's here, I don't know what to do, you know. No, I'm going to step into that space. And we learn that in the course, you know, having to intervene. And there's heaps of times when I'm having to intervene, and not so much counsel, but certainly, and I think this is where chaplaincy has helped me, getting understandings of how to communicate and how to best approach people in those heated moments where it could easily explode, and nobody wants that. And you're there in that space, having to manage that space and manage estranged parents and family members. And yeah, it doesn't happen all the time, but certainly it does happen. And so I think, yeah, you do have to step in and give some advice or give some direction. Or, you know, I had a father of a bride who was estranged, and he came to me and he wanted to say something. It was a combined reception ceremony, so it was sort of the one event. And he said, "Oh, I'm not being given the opportunity to speak at my daughter's wedding. Would you be able to fit me in?" I said, "No, you know, I understand. That's a tough thing, but no, that's not going to happen today. You know, I'm sorry about that. I've been given strict instructions." And, you know, just approaching it with understanding and not responding to him in a way that's going to aggravate the situation, or, you know, it's going to, it's going to get out of control, you know, because those things can quickly happen. So, yeah, just having some of those chaplaincy skills probably in that, because I'm not a trained counsellor, you know.
Yeah. Before we move on to that, Denise Thompson asks, how long, Jerry, did it take you to find your lane?
A good question. Well, at first, I took everything, said yes to everybody. I just wanted to be in that space, and I know enough to know that you're going to learn as you go. You know, I still don't think I've done my best ceremony, so I'm still learning. I still stop on the side of the road when I see a wedding and jump out, listen to the celebrant, learn a few things, you know, so you're always learning. But at the start, take everything. I took everything, every couple. Yes, yes, yes. You know, I'm a bit like that in life. Say yes and then say no later, you know, rather than say no, then you can't say yes later. But after a while, I started to realize, probably took me a few years to realize, what do I really like? What am I really going to enjoy? And so, you know, I worked out the ceremonies that I don't like. So, for example, you won't find me doing a hot air balloon wedding. I like my feet on the ground. I don't do the nudist weddings. That's not my gig. So if that's your gig, I can pass them on to you. So you work out which couples and which ceremonies, you know. I know too, South Americans, they love to party. And, you know, I know some of the cultures that I like and some of the rituals that I know that are going to be attached to some of those cultures that I really love and want to be a part of it. Because for me, my tagline is, I'm not here to officiate, I'm here to celebrate. And I want to be part of that celebration, not just in and out. And, you know, kiss the bride, see you later, I'm off, you know. I want to hang around and I want to celebrate with you. So, yeah, but it took me a couple of years to work out my lane. My lane's affordable. My lane is relational. And over the years, that has paid off, because people end up then calling you a couple of years later. You know, there's one lady in Sydney, I've married 3 of her sons. She's got 3 to go. I've also done a funeral for them. I do the baby namings for them. And it's that relational approach. And it's that, you know, that's my lane. I want to stay connected and be a part of ongoing life ceremonies or life stage ceremonies. You know, I end up doing their funeral for their dog. I end up, you know, all sorts of different ceremonies that I'm officiating because of that affordable, relatable, relational. But not everyone is that. Not every celebrant wants to be relational and or affordable, you know. But you find your niche, you find your market. And then I think what I discovered, and a few students have asked me about this, is you want to have a large enough body of work or a body of evidence to be able to say no. So I can say no to that couple and not think, oh, am I going to get another one? You know, I know who I can say no to because I've got a body of evidence to support that plenty more work's going to come in my lane, in my space. And that takes time to get that body of evidence, So at the start, say yes to everything, and then you can trim it down as you go. Yeah.
Yeah. One question in the box there is how do you say no?
Well, you understand that they can say no to you. They've got the freedom to say, send you a text, hey, thanks for the coffee, we're going in a different direction, which is the language I use. Whenever I meet a couple, I say, if it's good, if it works, if you feel a connection, because there is plenty of evidence to support that people choose their celebrant by personality. So if we haven't connected at the meet and greet, you won't connect at the ceremony. I think you're kidding yourself if you think that's going to happen. So we connect or we don't connect. And I say to couples, if you don't feel we've connected, just, because I never pressure them at the meet and greet, just send me a text and just use the language, because people don't know how to say no. So I help them to say no to me by saying, we're moving in a different direction. That's it. Thank you. So if they've got the freedom to say no to me, I've got the freedom to say no to them. And I'll do that. I'll say, hey guys, I don't think we're a good fit. And so I wish you the best. I've got a couple of other settlements I could refer you to. So, but generally when I'm saying that, they're feeling that anyway. So, sometimes, yeah, sure. It's not easy to say no, but again, I'm not going to say yes and then not enjoy it. Because if I know I'm not going to enjoy it, I'm not going to deliver my best. And they deserve someone who they connect to and is going to deliver their very best. We can fake it, but I don't like faking it.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeremy, Melanie Sterling has asked, how do you keep your clients for future work with them?
They remember you. They keep your number. Yeah. Yeah. We do that in life, don't we? You meet someone at a pub, you have a great conversation. Hey, can I have your number? You remember them. Hey, I'd like to catch up with you again or whatever. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't meet many people at the pub, but I know what you're saying.
Wherever.
And you also mentioned, when people inquire with you, obviously, they might find you on Easy Weddings or somewhere, and they're looking at a range of people. They might shoot you a message. You sort of know, as you said, you know your lane. If they don't look like they're in your lane, like they look about as exciting as a piece of plywood, you're slow to respond, because as we know in sales, it's speed to the lead gets the job. And if you see a couple that look like they're in your lane, they're a lot of fun, their pictures show them having a lot of fun, and this is a weekend that you think, oh, that, like, the venue and the couple look great. Yeah, I'd love to be a part of that. I'm sort of speaking for you here. You reply to them quickly. Is that generally?
No, because that would be to go against my principle. So my principle is I respond in 10 minutes. So if I don't respond in 10 minutes because I don't like them, that's a story that could be told. And I don't want that story to be told. I'd rather respond in 10 minutes and say no than not respond and let that be the no, because that then very quickly can get out into the community. Jeremy doesn't respond, and I don't want that, So I just respect people and respond whether I, got that vibe if I want to or not. Because the thing for me too is, because I put my prices on the website, there's a video on the website. So really my thought processes are, they're ringing me because they've seen me, they've heard me, and they know the price. So the only reason they're ringing really is to see if I'm available. So I should respect that and get back to them straight away with a yes or no. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay.
Also, the fact is, Adam, that things might change. So it could be a no because I'm busy and I only do one a day anyway, but their date might change. So if I haven't responded quickly, they won't come back to me. You didn't respond the first time, so why should we go back the second time? They won't.
Yeah. So I want to sort of move the conversation now to chaplaincy and ask you about that. I'm being cheeky here. I'm putting up the only reference I have to chaplaincy, which is
Not me. That's not me.
which is Father McCahey from MASH 4077. If you're a baby boomer or a Generation X, you couldn't help but see the reruns of MASH, and you know who this guy is. And of course, he was the chaplain that sort of was the go-to person in the military in that long-running series. But can you tell us a bit about your background in chaplaincy and what a chaplain does?
Yeah, around about 6-7 years ago, I had the opportunity to take on a contract and be a chaplain, and so I did the chaplaincy course. I did a certificate in chaplaincy, and I really enjoyed it. Absolutely loved it. Some of the skills, some of the understandings, the principles that are connected in that chaplaincy space were interesting. The subjects and the topics in that course I found very interesting. Looking at grief, which I hadn't done before. And so I really enjoyed it. And as it turned out, I completed the course, but then I said no to that particular contract. And so I didn't move into the chaplaincy space. But what I did discover is that it helped me immensely. I think I'm a better father, a better husband, a better celebrant, a better trainer from doing that course and some of those skills and understandings that I gained in doing that course. So even though I didn't move into the chaplaincy space in terms of a vocation or a paid position, I've actually found that some of those skills have dovetailed beautifully into the chaplaincy space.
I think most of us would think of chaplaincy as being in sort of the religious camp rather than sort of the civil side of things. But I understand that's not exactly the case. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, definitely. That's where chaplaincy started. It was, and even, you know, the MASH guy there, he was a priest, wasn't he? He's a priest, he's a chaplain. And that's where it started. But now the chaplaincy space is moved into the corporate world. It's moved into education, healthcare, private, civil space. So it's no longer, though there's still, I mean, most people are spiritual in some way. They might not be faith-based, but there's a spirituality about us all. And so people, you know, they face challenges in life and relational or whatever it might be. And so they're looking for perhaps not a counsellor, but someone in that chaplaincy space that can provide some guidance, a listening ear. I find it's helped me in facilitating discussion with people. Even, you know, couples that are getting married and family members. Obviously in the funeral space, it's made a huge difference for me when you're facing grief, and to be able to understand the stages of grief, be able to, and it helps you to relate to people when you're meeting and greeting in the funeral space, to be able to identify the different stages of grief. That person's angry. So I'm not going to go and shake their hand like Scott Morrison did, you know, if you saw that. I can understand they're still in shock and denial, or they're in acceptance, and you can see that. You are able to identify that, and it helps you then to relate to them. It helps you in the conversation, or to not have a conversation because it could be hostile. Whereas before, I didn't have those understandings, you know.
So I understand it's not necessarily a faith-based position any longer, because corporates, like Jean, you were saying before the webinar that if you just a quick look on Seek, there are
there were a lot of positions available for chaplains within large corporations or smaller corporations as well. And someone just asked the question, can you be a celebrant and a chaplain? Yes, you can.
Yeah.
That, you know,
a lot of the positions are in schools, universities.
And I think we talked about that before. Sometimes it might come under a different title in a school. They might not be called a chaplain as such, but they would be offering the same services. That be right, Jeremy? Back over to you. Yeah.
It's definitely made me a better celebrant. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Having some of those conversations, just even, you know, for example, and maybe some of the audience here, you're starting out and you're wondering to yourself, that first meet and greet, what am I going to say? What questions am I going to ask? And, you know, and you get worked up about it. And, you know, as soon as you start going down that road of what am I going to say? What question am I going to ask? And am I going to pay for the coffee? And am I going to choose the cafe? It's all about you. It's all about me. And you know, you kind of forget about the couple because you're caught up in yourself. One of the skills that I learned in the chaplaincy space was to take your cues for conversation from the client, from the patient, you know. So when I go to a cafe, I'm not thinking about what am I going to say and, you know, making it about me. It's more about them, and I let the couples guide the questions, and I take interest in them. And, you know, it's not, okay, I'll tell you who I am and I'll tell you what I can do for you. And you know, it's all about me. And so some of those skills then, sometimes in a meet and greet, it might be 10 or 15 minutes before I ask a question or I guide the conversation toward, you know, you're getting married. But by the time that happens and I've listened to them and let them guide the questions and let them guide the conversation, they feel really connected. And so by the time it comes to, oh, Jeremy, you better tell us about what you can do for us and, you know, who you are, they've already connected and they already want me. And so it actually, you can see it in their face. It's like they look at each other and they think, this is our guy, this is our celebrant, and he hasn't even talked about himself. So some of those skills I learned in that chaplaincy course.
Yeah.
Adam, it would be really interesting having heard Jeremy's, I guess, description of chaplaincy as such, how he uses it. Who here would think that they would put their chaplaincy with celebrancy? Who, if you think you'd be interested or you could connect the two together, put it in chat. Just put a yes or a no in the chat if you think that would be something that you would be interested in. Sorry to interrupt there.
No,
Jeremy has sold me into becoming a chaplain, listening to him speak today, this morning, and in a few other conversations we've had.
I think definitely for some of you that are in the celebrant space and you're thinking about becoming a funeral celebrant, I would almost beg you to go and do a chaplaincy course, because in that funeral space where you're faced with loss, and wherever there's loss, there's grief, and having some of those understanding, you don't have to do a master's course, but just having some basic understandings of the stages of grief, it absolutely helps you to relate to the families in their dark moments and some of those understandings. Because even though we touch on it a little bit in the celebrancy course, we don't go into the role plays. We don't go into some of those role plays where your eyes are open, you know, and you get some skills there to help, because that can be a very challenging space, that funeral space. I don't do a lot of funerals. I only do them for family and friends now. But back in the day, I didn't have a clue about grief. I didn't have a clue how to relate. And I really just related to them as a wedding celebrant, as a marriage celebrant. But it's chalk and cheese, you know. So to have some of those understandings and be able to go in as almost like a qualified funeral celebrant, and qualified because I've done a chaplaincy course and have some understandings about that grief space. So yeah, it definitely helps.
Yeah, from what I'm hearing, Jeremy, it's sort of like it's different to a counsellor where you're going to have an ongoing engagement with people. It's really about dealing with people. Sounds like it's almost like a first responder to people in crises. I can imagine that's perhaps the reason to have, like a corporation would have a celebrant, or schools have a celebrant. It's sort of the first port of call in terms of perhaps accessing the counsellor or accessing the addiction courses or dealing
people
with
in those moments, Adam, they're not ready for counselling yet. Often, you know, it's just a listening ear. It's just someone who can demonstrate empathy and a little bit of understanding that we're offering them. And the counselling comes later with a qualified counsellor, you know. But right in that moment, they're not needing counselling. So, in fact, chaplaincy is not counselling. That's the thing that it's not, you know. And I think that delineation is made very clearly. You're not going to graduate from a chaplaincy course and be a counsellor. Far from it, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there any more questions, Adam, related to? I haven't been watching the chat, but I wouldn't like people to have missed out on the questions about the celebrancy space, or we got everything.
There was more specific questions that perhaps I'll answer later on. Well, you brought up the fact that you were a religious celebrant, Jeremy, to begin with, and went over to civil celebrancy. There were a few questions that were asked about, can you be registered for both, or words to that effect. No, you cannot. You can be a religious celebrant under category A, or you can be a celebrant under category C as a civil celebrant. You can't be registered for both, just to clear up any confusion there. I think that was two ladies that asked about that.
But the civil license gives you the freedom to do both religious
to do everything. Yeah.
Okay.
But the religious celebrant is not meant to do civil ceremonies.
No, they're doing their ceremonies within the church, aren't they?
That's right.
Yeah, well, under the banner of that church, under the religious beliefs of that church.
Yeah, well, we're coming up to the top of the hour now, so we're going to go to more questions and answers in a minute. But I'm just going to move to the next slide, where we're introducing a mentorship program at Rose Training for Rose Training graduates. This is something that our students have asked for, and someone did ask the question, how do you get through the first ceremony? I'm not quite sure who said that. It's further up in the chat, but can you talk a bit about that, Jeremy, getting through your first ceremony? And then maybe a little bit about, maybe Jean, you could talk about the mentorship program that will be available to our graduates once they finish, and who will be mentoring them.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll go Jeremy first and then Jean.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I thought you asked me. Sorry.
I once heard Richard Branson say, "Start before you're ready," and I was always interested in that. And I think that would be my advice. If you wait till you're ready, you could be waiting forever. So just start, take that first one, and understand that it's like driving a car. You'll be on your L's. Even though you've got your registration, your authorised number from the Attorney General, you are going to be on your L's for the first, dozen or 20 ceremonies. So just accept that. And, I had a couple, I had a celebrant contact me, a student that was doing their first one. And they said to me, oh, should I tell them that it's going to be my first ceremony? I said, look, you don't have to, but if you want to. Anyway, she did. And the response was beautiful. The couple said, oh, that's okay if it's going to be your first ceremony, because it's the first time we're getting married. And I just thought, how beautiful is that?
That's lovely.
I think you've just got to start and put yourself out there, learn as you go, because that's how you're going to learn. You can only learn so much by watching celebrants. Your real learning is going to take place as you start getting into it and making your mistakes and just making sure you debrief and you review and you don't make those same mistakes again. But look, I just find now, be upfront about it. Yeah, I'm just starting and, but they're going to connect to your personality, and as long as you can answer their questions. The trouble you run into when you first start is if you're meeting couples and you can't answer the questions, then you look unprofessional, and that's not going to go well for you. But this is where we tell students, don't we, Jean, that those 9 mock ceremonies you've got to do, when you do your first one, it's not really your first one because you've done 9 mock ceremonies in the course and you've learned from
That's
that.
right.
Especially when it comes to the recording days,
Yeah.
where you and I are there and giving them the feedback, and you've seen that, Adam,
Yeah.
and that's invaluable, isn't it?
Invaluable, yes.
Yeah.
But we all start somewhere. My first ceremony, the bride of the mother was not happy because it was my first one. And she told me that at the rehearsal. She said, I'm not happy that my daughter's getting married by a novice. I said, okay, well, I understand that. And I said, I am doing it for free because she's marrying one of my mates. So how about I give you $500 at the end of the day if you're not happy? And at the end of the ceremony, I looked for it and I opened my wallet and I said, I can't remember how much money I said I'd give you if you weren't happy. She said, put it away, Jeremy. It was fine, So
We all start somewhere, don't we?
It's going to be challenging,
Yeah.
You're going to make mistakes. I still make mistakes, I forgot to say the monitor the other week, but that doesn't really matter.
That's a joke.
It's a joke. Yes, I fell for it. Line and sinker. Where do we go from there?
Yeah.
He is joking, everyone.
I feel like I'm being chided
monitor.
a little bit, Jeremy, because you and Jean have been pressuring me to do the course and become a celebrant. I feel like I'm sitting here being like,
Yes.
It's kind of working.
Telling you what to do. My first ceremony, I asked everyone to stand and I didn't ask them to sit until a few minutes into the ceremony. So I always say to my students, make sure you script, please stand and please sit if you're having people stand or sit.
That's a rookie error, that one.
That is big time. Yeah.
All right, Jean, can you tell us a bit about
the mentoring? So there will be a lot more information released over the coming days or week or so. But Jeremy, myself, Kay, Mark and Tony are all celebrants and trainers, and we're opening up our calendar for anyone that is looking at needing to be mentored. So the details of that will come later on, but if you become registered and you're at that point where you think, I'm registered, what now? What do I do? And you want some guidance from experienced celebrants to perhaps help you go through the forms or give you some tips on preparing for the ceremony, preparing for rehearsal, whatever it is that you feel you might need guidance for, then we're all going to be there for you to just reach out to one of us. Jeremy, you do a lot of that now, don't you?
Yeah, I love it. So, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing 29 years later if I didn't love it. And I find a lot of joy in helping students, in those first few ceremonies. So yeah, we can do that.
I was constantly laughing at the mock wedding ceremony day in Sydney because Jeremy's got these canned responses for all the way along. And it's kind of like, I suppose if I hung out with him more, I'd start to catch on and the jokes wouldn't be so funny, but I'm hearing them for the first time, cracking myself up, so he's got a lot of great lines like that. And Jean's the same. I listened to her go through, and she's got great one-liners for different stages in the wedding ceremony. And
you know what, Adam? It takes years to develop those one-liners,
Yes.
and the ones that work, and we all
Yes.
have them. And but when you first start out, you don't have any one-liners to use. So that's why the quicker you start and get into it, you learn, how to respond to. You see the same situation, it's just different people.
Yes. Yeah.
I did notice that there was a couple students made a couple mistakes, which turned out to be great one-liners, and you said, I'm going to use that one. I'm going to use that one. I think one of them was like, you can kiss this, and now you can kiss the celebrant.
Oh, yes, I actually like that one. I heard about that one, Jeremy.
Yeah.
You may kiss the bride and now you can kiss the celebrant. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I've used that in a ceremony, and
I think it's fabulous. And I guess in saying that, you read the room, don't you? You read the couple, you know how you're connected, and you know whether it's appropriate to be able to say something like that. Yeah. And they're the tips. Like at one of the ceremony days recently in Brisbane, like Jeremy, the comments are, okay, here's a tip. Here's something to think about. If you're doing this, think about that. That is all the information that we have gained through years and years and years of trial and error almost. And then you just, you put them to a page as tips and tricks to think about and use at certain times in ceremonies.
Yeah, and some of them are just so effective at, cutting the nervous tension.
Yeah. Turn your phones to silent. Do not be the one that I call out halfway through the ceremony. Do not be that person.
There's a few questions coming up. I've said it quite regularly there. Does it take 90 days to get your registration? From what I hear from students, it's actually 90 days to the day. So it does.
It is, Jeremy. So everyone, I have been watching the registrations come through. It's exactly 90 days to when you put your application in. But there were some other questions from people that were saying it was taking longer. If you make a mistake with your application, if you don't upload a document, if you don't upload ID that's asked for, if you don't fill in a form correctly, it will take longer than 90 days because AG will contact you for the information they want. Whilst you're uploading the new information, you'll go to the bottom of the pile. So they don't hold you in the spot that you're in. So if it's taking longer than 90 days, it's generally because there's been a hold up in identifying who you are or getting relevant information. No quicker, absolutely no quicker. So if anyone here has got some time constraints, it's going to take 90 days when your registration goes through.
Yep. We've just passed the top of the hour, so I'm going to ask you, if you've got a question that you want to ask Jeremy or Jean, quickly type it in the chat box. And if Jean, if you could just go through and answer any of those questions before we log off, because I know people need to go back to work or got to get on with the day. So I just we'll take maybe a few more questions and then we'll sign off.
I think people have been asking the question about where can they do a chaplaincy course, I noticed there as well.
Yes.
Is that something Rose Training's thinking about maybe in the future or not?
Ian, our boss, is in the webinar. I see him nodding his head and giving a thumbs up. It's looking like it might be something that, yes, we do offer in the near future. Yeah.
So information will go out about that.
Just pop that in the chat too, as Jean was saying. If it is something that you would be interested in looking at, chaplaincy, let us know in the chat box.
Okay, here's one, Jeremy, for you. It's pretty good. What tip would you give a new celebrant? What are some of the tips? Because you and I will have a list of different tips.
Look, be yourself. Don't overpromise. often when you start out, you overpromise to try to get the booking, and then you end up promising things that you can't deliver. Don't overpromise things that you haven't, seen before or done before. It's not the place to try to change the celebrancy space when you first start. Just go with the flow, and then as you get confident, you can, try new things. But just say yes to everything and put yourself out there. I think one of the best websites I've seen is called One Flair. If you're registered with them, we had a student that I taught. He took 70 bookings in 6 months just from One Flair. So have a look at that. You might not be getting much more than $100 or $250 because it's a bit more low budget, but it's a great way to start, get experience, get photos, get videos, get reviews, learn your lessons, and then progress to something like Easy Weddings. Some of those websites like Easy Weddings are not set up for brand new students, because if you don't have reviews and photos and video, people won't contact you. So use One Flair. Get onto socials. When you do those mock ceremonies, dress up, get some photos of them. You could use those photos on social media, on Insta. They don't know it wasn't a real wedding. It was a mock, but it still gives the appearance of, and you've got something to get into the market with. Unless you've already got, friends, most students are doing friends or family, and you're doing the course because you're going to. So that's an easy way into it that way. You're not having to sell yourself. But there's heaps of work out there. There's 130,000 weddings a year in Australia, so there's plenty of work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. And another question was asked, do you need another police check if you're a JP? Yes, you do. Doesn't matter what other occupation you're in, the Attorney General in your application, they will do an independent police search. So it's just standard. It's part of that application. So it doesn't matter what you've already had done. I think that's it for the questions pretty much.
There's one more question in there from Radmilla. What is the best microphone? What is the best microphone for a new celebrant to purchase? Now, I notice both of you use two different ones, so maybe both of you can answer that one.
Jeremy, you first.
Yeah, I use a Bose Pro 1, which I think it's the best on the market. About $800 for a Bose Pro 1 speaker. And then with the microphone, I use a Shure microphone, but there's about a $400 gadget you can get to make it wireless. You plug one end into the microphone and the other end into your speaker. And I find that could do 300 outdoor. So you're probably looking at about $1,500 to get yourself a decent speaker, microphone, setup, and a stand.
I've used a mic. Yeah, sorry, Jeremy.
If you go cheap, you'll regret it. So you'll pay one way or the other. You'll either pay because you've got bad sound, and you will pay for that, or you'll pay to set yourself up. If you've never heard yourself through a microphone and a speaker, you're going to sound different. So get good quality. You can skimp on some things like a signing table or whatever, but don't skimp on sound system and microphone. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I've had a MyPro for 13, 14 years, and it's just retired a couple of weeks ago. And I'm using the Bose Pro system that Jeremy's has. I've only used that in the last 2 ceremonies. I'm pretty happy with it. Bluetooth to the music, Bluetooth to the microphone. That little package when I bought it was around about $1,300 for the microphone and the system. But Jeremy is so 100% absolutely correct in you'll get what you pay for. And the quality of your voice, the quality of the sound, the audio in the ceremony is the most important thing, apart from actually getting through the script that you've written for the couple. If people can't hear you, or if the sound is awful, you're just going to annoy people with screechy sound on a microphone. If you're not sure what you want to get, hire a couple of different PA systems and practice until you decide which one you want. Or
And of course,
maybe
we've got the MyPro system available on the website for sale. And if you're a platinum student, you get it at a discounted price. That's also got the wireless function in it too, doesn't it, Jim?
yes, it does. And somebody asked if you use a headset or a microphone. I don't use a headset. I prefer the microphone. Jeremy, do you have a preference?
Yeah, look, if you want to use the Madonna sort of head, mic thing, that's good for you. But then when the couple say their vows, you probably need to have a microphone, a handheld microphone with stand, so they can use that.
Yeah. And then you've got to navigate the on and off with the microphone, don't you? On with yours, on off with theirs. So there's a bit of a time lapse with that one as well. And functionality, ladies, if you put a microphone, a Madonna mic on, if you're wearing trousers, it will be easy for you to put your little power pack in your pocket. If you're wearing a dress, then that power pack's got to go down the back of your dress somewhere and tuck in, and you've got to be able to switch it on and off at certain times as well. And if you're a princess and you wear your hair up, the little microphone can cause you problems getting it on and off as well. And as Jeremy said, directing with a microphone, if you've got a microphone in your hands, you can give it to the couples as they're saying their vows or as they're repeating their legal vows. So
if you get a good system, you can actually have both on at the same time.
Yes. So some things to think about there as well.
All right. I think that brings us to the end of our webinar, our session. And I'm going to call it. But Jeremy, it's been wonderful to spend an hour with you and to hear from you directly, talking about your experience, and so much really appreciate it. Look, I think we've people are starting to leave now, but I know right up till about 5 minutes ago we've had people stay all the way through to the end, and I know people have got to leave to go to work. It's been very gripping. A lot of people here to learn from you and hear what you've had to say, and we appreciate that you've made yourself available to talk about your experience and share that with us. Thank you for spending the hour with us, everybody. Again, if you want to know a bit more about Celebrancy or the mentorship program, just get in touch with the office, the Rose Training office. Again, appreciate you all for being here. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, everyone. Bye.